So when you're building on the water, clearly there are some environmental issues that you need to be aware of. And we knew what we wanted, and we had to rely on Brent's expertise to figure out how to make that happen. What we wanted was a house that was going to last multiple generations in spite of the wind and the weather and potential hurricanes. And we certainly didn't want it to fall off the foundation. We wanted it to be very low maintenance. We wanted it to be warm in the winter and cool in the summer. And all of those things, as we put together our design requirements, and it was up to Brent to say what the specifications are that are going to allow us to achieve those goals. So the things like the metal roof, spray foam insulation. We wanted a lot of glass in the front facing the water. That brings requirements for well-built windows, French doors that can withstand 30, 40 mile an hour winds in the middle of winter and still have a comfortable living experience. We didn't know technically how to make that happen. We just knew what we wanted. And so part of the give and take with the design build company was saying, this is what we want. And Brent saying, okay, this is what I would recommend, and this is what it's going to cost you. And we would reach a conclusion about where we wanted to go. And it was a great experience from start to finish. So when Lisa and I finally decided, okay, this is the year we're going to start seriously looking for a property, we realized that it was important to choose a builder and an architect. Quite frankly, at that point, I was unfamiliar with the design build concept. And so we started with some recommended architects. We talked to some friends and we looked at some websites of architects who had worked on the Eastern Shore, started to meet with them. At the same time, I started looking up builders, knowing that we would be required to have someone to actually build the house for us. It was at that point that we came across Brent's name and website, and it intrigued me quite a bit. I thought, well, can you skip a major communication window between the designers and the builders and put that all into one company, one person, and be successful in doing so. So it was a bit of a risk. Clearly, if you have an architect and a builder, you kind of have two different folks who are checking each other's work, so to speak, and can referee things for you in a way that potentially a single company can't. So I think you have to have an awful lot of trust in the person who's going to do all of that for you. And we met with Brent and absolutely felt completely confident in his ability, his company's ability to put all this together for us, and never looked back. It went incredibly well from start to finish, and it was true that the confidence we had at the beginning was justified throughout the entire process. Well, when we were looking at what type of house to build, we wanted it to fit in with the environment and the area. We knew we wanted a wraparound porch. That's something that we've been excited about for years. We wanted to have great views. When you site a house on a property that's looking at uninterrupted water on three sides, you want to be able to see it. So that means there's going to be a lot of glass. As far as the design goes, we had a general idea of what type of house we wanted and submitted that to Brent, who then took those concepts and designed the specific house that would fit within our building envelope and our budget envelope. And we're very pleased with the way it came out. So when we started this particular project, we had no experience whatsoever in designing a house. The other house that we had owned was already designed. We had moved into new construction, but didn't have a lot of flexibility in terms of design. It was built in a neighborhood. This was the design you were going to get on this lot. And other than small finish changes that we could make, we were not involved in the design of that property at all. This was a new adventure for us and a little bit scary. I mean, basically, we could design anything that we wanted, and that's not our professional area of expertise, and we didn't have any personal experience doing it. So I think it's incredibly important that you work with someone who you're confident is going to be able to take your vision and your concept and your dream and execute it. There's a big difference between, well, we want this, and actually getting to that. And what Brent and his team were able to do is take our design concepts and make it a reality. There's many steps that go into designing the property, getting all of the pieces here, putting all of those pieces together, and then fitting it out to where you can walk in, see something like this, and be comfortable in it every day. And I think that level of guidance is important for a family, a couple to look for. Someone who's going to be able to communicate, someone who's willing to listen to design changes that you're inevitably going to have, and an individual or a company that's going to be flexible enough when unforeseen things happen, and we had a few, to be able to continue to execute on that vision. So the permitting process and the restrictive covenants and the Army Corps of Engineers and county and state and federal regulations that apply to building on the water are pretty daunting, quite frankly. And I suppose there are separate ways to do that. You can do all of that yourself as the landowner, and then bring your builder in. But someone who is familiar with your area, knows the people, knows the offices, and can answer specific questions about that location, and what they're going to try to accomplish for you at that location, I think is invaluable. It became very clear to me early on when I was working with the county permitting folks that they would ask 10 questions and I would know the answer to 2 of them, and I would have to go back and research those and find out the answers. So, I would strongly recommend that you work with a company that knows the area, that knows what the typical restrictive covenants are, that has worked with the permitting folks before, and preferably knows them by name, and they're confident in the builder and the builder's confident in them to help answer those questions smoothly. And I think Brent and his team were extremely helpful. We tried starting out doing it ourselves, but once we were able to transition and contracted with Paquin Design Build, then almost all of those questions were answered and taken care of by the company, and it was so much easier for us, and we were so much more confident the answers were going to be yes, because the people who were issuing the permits knew that they were dealing with someone they could trust. So a local builder, and someone who knows the people, knows the area, is incredibly effective at getting a very, very complex bureaucracy to work with you to achieve that goal. So I think if you're going to use a design build firm, you have to recognize that there are some trade-offs. One of the enormous advantages is in efficiency. You do completely eliminate a communication step between the architect and the builder general contractor. When we wanted to change something about this design, we call Brent. Brent would snap it, quote it, and was going to build it. And it just happened without any interruption in the build out or any delays at all. In fact, we were several months ahead of schedule in completing construction of this house. When does that ever happen? On the other hand, you have to have an extremely high degree of trust in that individual, because as I think I mentioned, you don't have an architect, checking the builder and a builder checking the architect. And I think if you're doing a very expensive project, there's a potential benefit in having two different professionals or two different professional firms sort of bouncing things back and forth and making sure that someone's checking the other's work. So if you're going to go with a design build firm, make sure that it's someone you trust, someone that you think is going to continue to execute the way you want it to be executed. In our case, we're not designers, we're not builders, we're not carpenters. I barely know which end of a hammer is which. So we had to trust that when Brent said, this is the way this is going to work, that it was going to work that way. In the end, it did, and it did so very smoothly, on budget and ahead of schedule. So I think if you want those advantages, find a design build firm that you can trust and go with it. It's interesting, one of the things we weren't really prepared for was the number of choices you have to make when you build a custom home. Like I said, we had moved into new construction in our other house, but it was pretty well designed, and we could choose different cabinets in the kitchen and carpet, and that was about it. So we had maybe 14 choices we had to make. With a custom home, everything is your choice. Every light switch, every piece of molding, what type of insulation, what type of HVAC systems, what type of roof, what type of siding, what colors, you name it. There are tens of thousands of choices to make. And working with someone who understands what your overall theme is and what your goals are is extremely important. So it stands to reason that it's extremely important for them to know up front what your vision is. I think one of the ways that we were able to work well together, Brent Paquin and Lisa and I, was having a very clear vision from the start. As I think back, a well-built home that's low maintenance, that's energy efficient and tightly built, that's going to last a long time, that has great views of the water, that has sort of a nautical theme throughout, aligns all of those hundreds and thousands of detailed decisions and narrows down your choices dramatically. Once you decide that every piece of metal in the house is going to be nickel or chrome, you've brought the universe down to a manageable number of doorknobs and faucets and light fixtures. Once you decide that you're never going to use a 2x4 when a 2x6 will do, then that steers the design build company along a certain path of window quality, roof quality, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're going to build a custom home and you haven't done it before, be prepared for many, many, many questions along the way from your designer builder, because in fairness, they have to ask you these things. They're not going to make decisions for you. What Brent was able to do was space these decisions nicely throughout the construction project so that it didn't become overwhelming. Rather than asking for all of these decisions up front, he would do that with enough lead time to order the equipment and get it in and not interrupt the building schedule, certainly. But sequence it so that we didn't have to make 27,000 decisions in the first 2 weeks. We were both working. we had lives that we needed to live while we were building this project out. So that's another, good piece of advice that, I would lend to folks who are embarking on this type of project. Make that clear to the builder from the beginning, as Brent sort of made it clear to us that, he would sequence those, hundreds and hundreds of decisions throughout the project.